So, this is a pretty crazy coincidence. On my other channel, Seconds of Horror, I had spoken about a specific date, that date being August 12th, 2026. Now, the reason why I spoke about this date happened to be because there was something being spread around not just social media, but also mainstream media as well, that the Earth will experience a loss of gravity for 7 seconds on this date, thanks to a supposed leak of a NASA document called Project Anchor. Now, before we do go any further, when I spoke about this, the comment section pretty much became a mix of gravity is real, gravity's not real, gravity's just a theory, and I had to keep telling people that's not what the video is about. The video is about why do these ritualists want us to focus on this date and have fear going into this date. Of course, they're always lying to us. Of course, the Earth is not going to experience anything like that on August 12th. But again, the purpose behind that video was why do they want us having these negative emotions going into August 12th? It kind of feels like the April 8th solar eclipse. Then there was one comment that really blew my mind, and it connected the dots between the April 8th solar eclipse and this upcoming August 12th date. And that connection has to do with this one man right here who was known as the Great Beast, Aleister Crowley. Now, I know some people out there will say that Aleister Crowley's old news. We've been talking about him for a long time. I was exposing him even when I was a child, sitting on my Meemaw's kneecappers, so why are we still talking about him? The thing is, he's still relevant because we still have these ritualists practicing his dark demonic magic, summoning things over. There were 3 very important dates to Aleister Crowley, with April 8th being one, and the other one just happens to be August 12th, with the other one being March 20th. The reason why this date was so important to him was because this was his 1903 anniversary of his marriage to Rose Edith Kelly, known in Thelema as the Feast of the Prophet and his bride. But not just that, this date commemorates the union that led to the reception of his most significant work, the Book of Law. While the August 12th was the catalyst for this book, the book wasn't received until April 8th, 1904, when he was in Cairo, Egypt with his wife, where Aleister Crowley summoned and communicated with an entity named Aiwass. And as coincidence may have it, where did the 2017 solar eclipse and the 2024 solar eclipse come together to form an X? It formed an X over Cairo, Illinois. What are the odds? But going back to August 12th isn't just any random date. It's actually a very sacred Thelemic holiday to these ritualists. So it's no wonder they want people to believe that something big, something bad is going to happen on August 12th, because they want people to pour their negative emotions, fear, and so forth into this date, playing into this Thelemic holiday. Now, again, no different than the April 8th solar eclipse, where we saw the same exact thing, not just with people on social media saying that the world was going to end, but we also had news and media telling people to stock up on goods. There was going to be power outages, even an earthquake.
The strongest earthquake in 140 years, John.
Look at all that. And it's not over yet, because we've got the eclipse earthquake coming up on Monday. As Deborah Ross was telling us, it's going to be a transformative experience for anybody who is in the area of totality.
When there was all this fear and anxiety going into the eclipse, what did we see when the eclipse was starting? We saw this. And since then, we have been seeing these black flying things a lot. And I feel like after the eclipse, the world became even more bizarre. There was a lot of strange news. And directly after, on April 9th, this is when we started to see the Bove Island anomaly as well. But here's the thing, even though August 12th is a very important sacred holiday for these Thelemic ritualists, August 12th happens every year. So why would they specifically choose August 12th, 2026 to hype up something catastrophic happening to cause people to have fear and anxiety going into this date? Well, here is the mind-blowing coincidence that will knock your socks right off. Just like April 8th having a solar eclipse, August 12th, 2026 will also have a major, very rare solar eclipse as well. And guess where it's crossing over? It just so happens to cross over Greenland. And hasn't Greenland just been in the news a lot lately? But what makes the August 12th solar eclipse so rare is the fact that it'll also occur during the Perseids meteor shower, so there will be things seen flying in the skies, and more than likely people will just say it's just a meteor. Not just that, but the 2026 total solar eclipse will begin a golden age of solar eclipses, and we've been hearing a lot about a golden age as well. So they're going to go ahead and use this date to try to usher or summon something over, just like we saw with the April 8th solar eclipse. But what is even more interesting is that the April 8th solar eclipse was so important that it was even featured on the Economist magazine cover, and we know the Economist magazine cover is also a very ritualistic cover where they let us know what's going to happen ahead of time, and you can see it right here. Now, when it came to the 2026 Economist magazine cover, as I stated before, for the very first time in the history of the Economist magazine, they released two covers. They released this one right here, which is the official cover. But before this cover, they released this cover right here, which shows two Earths, with one eclipsing the other. The summary of this cover was that this year, President Donald Trump has demolished long-standing norms and upended decades-old institutions at breathtaking speed. The old world order is finished, and in 2026, the contours of what will replace it will emerge. In the week we published our new edition of The World Ahead, our future-gazing guide to the coming year. Our top editors consider what 2026 will reveal about the future of Western liberal democracies, the reshaping of global power structures, the outlook for the world economy, and the impact of new technologies. Now, and if you watched a lot of what was coming out of Davos, the World Economic Forum gathering this year, that pretty much screams what they're saying here. But this cover gives off such an eerie feeling. You can see a red glow like the sun would give off, but you can also see the black coming in, the darkness coming in. This definitely symbolizes a total solar eclipse, but instead of a sun and a moon, again, we're being shown two Earths. The new Earth is eclipsing the old Earth, probably letting us know once again the Earth will change into a much more bizarre and strange place after this August 12th eclipse. This can also be seen as the spiritual realm crossing or merging with the physical realm. But I feel like for the most part we can stop them, even though we're bringing attention to it. We can say to ourselves, nothing's going to happen on this date. There's going to be no gravity blackout like the media is hyping. Nothing catastrophic is going to happen. It's just going to be another normal every other day. Not putting any fear and anxiety into their important ritualistic Thelemic holiday like they want us to. It is just so obvious they want us to take part in this giant ritual, and it's even more obvious given the fact that NASA is the one supposedly behind Project Anchor, and we know that NASA is a ritualist organization. And I would bet anything that they were the ones to begin this Project Anchor rumor and have it spread like wildfire across media. Because who was a pioneering American rocket engineer and chemist crucial to the foundation of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Aerojet Engineering Corporation, which later became vital to NASA? None other than Jack Parsons. And who was Jack Parsons' spiritual teacher? None other than Aleister Crowley. He was a dedicated practitioner of Thelemic occultism. He was known for summoning things over. He, L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, among others, they would go into deserts like ones in New Mexico and practice the Babylon workings in order to manifest an incarnation of the Thelemic goddess Babylon. Then months later in 1947, there would be an explosion of UFO sightings. So NASA, they continued these Thelemic rituals. Matter of fact, they were active during the April 8th solar eclipse when this serpent-like thing was seen crossing across the skies, because they themselves fired all three rockets called Apep, Apophis, or the devil, what is basically known as the Egyptian equivalent of Satan, the serpent. And on top of this, because this rumor is really spreading, and again, a lot of people have anxiety and they're saying all sorts of things, NASA just recently on January 19th gave a statement to this theory. This article from Unilag goes on to say NASA has responded to a theory claiming planet Earth will lose gravity for 7 seconds later this year. An alleged document from the space agency known as Project Anchor originally leaked in November 2024, with it claiming NASA believed Earth would lose gravity for 7 seconds on August 12, 2026. And again, I believe NASA was the ones to start this rumor. Speculation got a bit out of hand earlier this month after it was claimed 40 million deaths from falls will come because of the loss of gravity. Continue to read the article. It says, you'll be pleased to know that NASA has since debunked the wild theory online. The space agency told Snopes the Earth will not lose gravity on August 12, 2026. Earth's gravity or total gravitational force is determined by its mass, the only way for Earth to lose gravity would be for Earth's system, the combined mass of its core mantle, crust, ocean, terrestrial water, and atmosphere, to lose mass. A total solar eclipse has no unusual impact on Earth's gravity. So why would NASA debunk this rumor if they started the rumor? Because this is what these ritualists do. These ritualists always play a sort of game, some sort of karmic system. But the whole thing is absolute BS, and if anybody comes up to you or asks you about what they heard online, something taking place on August 12th, 2026, about a loss of gravity or something bad happening on that date, just tell them nothing is going to happen. It's just another ordinary day. Don't have any fear or anxiety going into this date because this is what they want. And I also wanted to touch on March 20th as well, because like I said, March 20th was another significant major holiday for Crowley and his wife. On March 20th, 1904, in Cairo, Egypt, Crowley's wife, acting as a medium, declared that the equinox of the gods has come. On this same day, Crowley performed a crucial ritual, sometimes called the Supreme Ritual, to invoke the Egyptian god Horus, which he declared a great success, and which immediately preceded the receipt of the Book of Law. So this is recognized as a major holiday marking the inauguration of the new Aeon of Horus, and is celebrated as the Thelemic New Year. Well, what major event just happened on this major Thelemic holiday? Well, as coincidence may have it, back on March 20th of 2003, the United States and allies invaded Iraq, marking the start of the Iraq War. You know, the war where a lot of people felt like they were being lied to, that we were told the United States was invading due to WMDs, which they were not, when in actuality they may have been after a Stargate. And on top of this, the United Nations just happens to recognize March 20th as the International Day of Happiness. A happy day for these Thelemic ritualists. And there is just so much going on in the world, so much going on in the news, and we have to remember that a lot of what we see is just scripted events by these ritualists. This is why we see the number 33 just flashing in the headlines of these major news articles. The Free Peoples just being another set of major ritualists. There's going to be many scripted ritualistic events to come with one of the goals in mind, pitting us against each other, having us fight against each other, and these are the things we have to look out for. But going back to these ritualists summoning things over like they have done before, A Call for an Uprising in his most recent video made a very good point that we are seeing these so-called powers that be shying away from these things being traditional quote-unquote aliens from another planet, like they have always tried to make us believe. And now we are seeing them shift to these things being more interdimensional.
And speaking of Elon Musk, another thing mentioned by Musk that needs to be noted is he went on a rant about aliens, but he was also mentioning the collective consciousness, without technically saying collective consciousness, but he's talking about consciousness. And he's talking about how they have all these satellites in space and they've never seen a UFO. And again, I've mentioned this a couple of times recently, how they're shifting away from telling us that UFOs actually exist to talking about interdimensional beings, which is really a fancy term for talking about demonic possession. And here he is talking about he'd be the first one to know about aliens. He, in fact, is an alien, which nobody out there actually denies. But remember, as Aleister Crowley once said, today we call them angels and demons. Tomorrow they will call them something else, which is, of course, referencing aliens. And here he is talking about it.
And again, before we go ahead and play any more of his video, we can see how much of a role Aleister Crowley has played in this whole alien agenda with the gray alien. Lamb, the spirit that he conjured over, looks almost identical to what we think aliens look like, the traditional gray alien. And you have to remember what it says right here, his quote, today they call them angels and demons, tomorrow they'll call them something else. And that's so true, because back then, they did not have the concept of connecting these grays to aliens, connecting Lamb to an alien. That didn't come until much later, because we who are not a part of these ritualists see Lamb as a demon, but media and the so-called powers that be twisted it for us to see these things as aliens.
I'm often asked, are there aliens among us? And I'll say that I am one, but...
Or you're from the future.
They don't believe me.
Okay.
But I think if anyone would know if there are aliens among us, it would be me. We have 9,000 satellites up there. and not once have we had to maneuver around an alien spaceship. So I'm like, I don't know. Bottom line is, I think we need to assume that life and consciousness is extremely rare, and it might only be us. And if that's the case, then we need to do everything possible to ensure that the light of consciousness is not extinguished.
So clearly he's hinting at interdimensional beings. And we've heard this from Congress over the last couple of years. We've heard it from professors at Harvard and other universities talking about interdimensional travel, how aliens exist, but they're not aliens up in spaceships. They're really interdimensional beings, which again is a fancy term for demons. And what is Elon Musk's plan? What is the plan from the beginning actually been with Project Mars, right? Project Mars, a book written by the founder of NASA. Think about that. The founder of NASA, Wernher von Braun, writes about a futuristic people who would colonize Mars and who would be led by someone called the Elon. Well, what a coincidence that he's trying to get this technology underneath everybody's skin.
And it's very interesting that he mentions Mars, Occupy Mars, Wernher von Braun, the Elon, and Mars, because Aleister Crowley's lamb is described by some as a Lama of Leng, or an entity dwelling on the dark side of Mars. And talking about cosmic beings, interdimensional beings, H.P. Lovecraft was known for that, and Lamb is often considered an avatar or a manifestation of the outer god Nyarlathotep. While not in H.P. Lovecraft's original stories, Lamb is frequently linked to Nyarlathotep in modern interpretations, including in games and other forms of media. And this is what a modern ritualist, Geordie Rose, had to say about Lovecraftian beings.
They might be really smart, they might be really good at all sorts of different things, but they're not going to be like us. They're going to be aliens. And they're going to be, I'm sorry to say, way smarter than every single person in this room, in ways that we can't even comprehend. So this, of course, triggers a lot of alarm. One of the guys who talks about this is Elon, who says things like this, like, when you do this, beware. Because you think, just like the guy in the stories, that when you do this, you're going to put that little guy in a pentagram, and you're going to have your holy water out, and you're going to wave it at the thing, and by God, it's going to do exactly what you say and not one thing more, but it never works out that way. So this is an attitude that some are having, this emerging alarmism about the way this is going to go. But these words, demons, doesn't capture the essence of what's happening here. I don't know if any of you are turn-of-the-century weird fiction fans, but there's this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who's a very famous American weird fiction author. And he espoused a view which is called cosmicism. And the essence of cosmicism is cosmic indifference. So what he was saying is basically, yes, there are these massively intelligent entities out there, but they're not good, they're not evil. They just don't give a shit about you even in the slightest. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, they're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. There are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate. And going back to that thing that Sam Harris was saying, nobody is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background while people bicker about politics and what's going to be in the healthcare plan in the US, and underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out.
So these ritualists are intertwining technology and dark ritualistic Aleister Crowley magics to summon these things over. And like he said, almost everything we see in the news that causes us to bicker back and forth to grab our attention to distract us is not as important as the things that they are doing. And a lot of this has to do with artificial intelligence as well, and we hear from these ritualists that when it comes to artificial intelligence, they are summoning the demon. And I found this very interesting article from Vice.com that goes all the way back to January 19th, 2012, and this article is titled Magical Stories Lamb. The article talks about this interview with this individual, Brian Butler, who talks about his demon worship experience in Brazil, which culminated in a lamb visitation. He begins with who or what lamb is, and he says that you can tell by looking at it that it looks like a gray alien, although it precedes it. But I want to skip to this part right here where he mentions his contact with Lamb and how he experienced terror. He said that, and the classic gray alien contact or experience is extreme terror, and I can relate to that in a way. This is how this self-titled demon worshiper describes Lamb. He goes on to say, it's a very cold, mechanical, kind of computer-like intelligence. It's what we perceive as artificial because it's not incarnated and it never was. So it doesn't have empathy or doesn't relate to that at all. And this goes hand in hand as to what Geordie Rose was saying, with these things they're summoning over have no empathy. They do not care about us one bit. Of course they don't. And what was Geordie Rose's entire conversation about? AI, quantum computers. It is all spiritual, and we can see how the dots connect. And again, going back to August 12th, the April 8th solar eclipse, and other dates to come, they want us, the public, to take part in these rituals, summoning these things over as well. Do not give in to their lies. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, as any engagement does help the channel grow. Once again, thank you so much for your support.